For today's episode, we delve into the meditative, character-driven piece that launched a screenwriter's career. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insight into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, I have a really interesting episode for you today because we have screenwriter Jesse Chatham, who co-wrote Land, and Land premiered at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. And, it really turned some heads. It got some great reviews, and it's no surprise why, because it's a cool script. And Jesse has a really interesting breaking in story where he chronicles what it was like to be kind of an outsider, not kind of an outsider, definitely an outsider, and getting his script into contests and kind of taking it all the way to the screen. So Jesse was really forthcoming about his creative habits, and I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, I hope you'll also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via the iPad app. Backstory, go figure. We recently published issue 42. It is packed to the brim with some great stuff and a lot of fun stuff for you to read. So I really hope you check out our table of contents over at backstory.net. And if you've never read us before, you could read the free issue in our iPad app or at backstory.net. And there's a lot of great stuff in it. It is a full issue. And hopefully after you read it and you decide that you like it, you'll consider subscribing. And if you do, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. So thanks for considering supporting my passion project. And folks, I've been saying this during the pandemic. If you didn't know, we launched a Backstory Magazine YouTube page so you could watch these Zoom interviews that I'm doing during the pandemic that become the audio for the podcasts. And if you're a YouTube watcher and didn't know that you could find us as a podcast, you could look up the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith in iTunes or Spotify to find us. And folks, remember, Land is independent cinema. So I hope you search it out, through your smart TV, through anywhere that you're used to renting movies online or on demand. And so I hope you'll make sure to support independent cinema and tell your friends and go check out Land. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our conversation with co-writer Jesse Chatham about his first film, Land. Okay, Jesse, how's it going over there? Good to see you.
Good, man. How are you?
I really dug your film, and it must have been cool for it to play at Sundance. Of course, we all could have wished that we were at Sundance, but now that it's out in the universe and stuff, I want to go back for a second to kind of give people a sense of who you are and where you come from. Tell us what made you want to go down the path towards being a filmmaker.
I actually didn't know I was going to pursue screenwriting until 2013. I'd done some writing. I'd started a couple of novels, did not finish them. Did short stories. I was a singer-songwriter. I was in a band. I was just kind of tap dancing around, really pursuing storytelling. But I turned 40 in 2013, and I kind of started to sense that I was entering middle age, and I sensed mortality, and I thought about what kind of life I was going to live for the rest of my life, and especially was concerned about getting to age 65 or 70 and not feeling good about the way I had spent the last 30 or 40 years of my life. I like this quote that says, "I'd rather die a failure than a coward." And that resonated with me. And I was like, you know what, let's do this. Like, I'm 40. This is like the last chance probably to really go for this. And so I did. I started going full time in 2013.
That's awesome. I mean, as a person in my early 20s, it's inspirational to hear somebody much older than me. Like, I'm joking, I'm not in my 20s. Everybody knows that. But this is great because there is no right time when you could start. The writer of King's Speech, he had made, Tucker with Coppola years back and had some little stuff, but he had kind of fallen off a little and had kind of gone through some tough times. But at the end of the day, he knew that he could write and he kept at it and revived himself. And so that's fantastic. So first off, what kind of music were you playing? What was the name of the band you were in before we move on?
It was called Jesse, Daniel and the Reckoning, which is not a great band name, I don't think, but that's kind of what we came up with. It was indie rock, kind of like rock / indie rock. Played out in Denver a number of times at some cool clubs. This is pre-Babies, circa 2009 to 2011. But a great time. I think part of turning 40 was having a kid. We just had our first child, and I had to settle down. Like I think in my early 30s and in my 20s, I was partying a lot. Nothing was serious. I wasn't taking my work especially serious. I was doing internet marketing at the time. So I enjoyed what I was doing, but it was not like a discipline. And when you have a baby, it just kind of reels in your lifestyle a lot to kind of like a fundamental, pragmatic kind of worldview of like, how do we get through the day? How do we pay bills? The baby's crying, da, da, da. It's not that sexy of a life at first, especially. But I think that having that kind of situation further grounded me. And I think that with turning 40 really kind of just was like, this is what I want to do. I got to do it. So
let's talk about that. Let's jump right into it. I've heard a lot of stories about how kids could kind of focus someone's writing habits, even just scheduling, knowing like they could write during naps and when the kid's asleep and stuff like that. But tell us where did you start at 40? Where was it you kind of decided to start to learn the craft of screenwriting?
We had just moved out to the country from Denver, not the country, but to some land, a couple of acres. And I just got interested in there's these two big satellite towers that were within, I could see them from our house. They're always, pointing to space. There's a lot of federal labs in the Boulder, Colorado area. And I got really interested in like, what if that was some nefarious thing going on? The government was doing something and there's a research, lab underneath it. And I got into this kind of sci-fi kind of thinking. And I started writing something that wasn't quite sci-fi, but it was kind of like secret-y, kind of like National Treasure, but a little more sciencey and a little bit more. It was kind of geared towards climate change. I was getting interested in climate change. In fact, as soon as we moved out to the area, we had a 100-year flood in the Boulder area, and it flooded a large part of the area. Thankfully, we were spared. But that also kind of triggered thoughts about the delicate nature of our existence as human beings, climate change, how fast we've been cruising through, we haven't slowed down at all since 2013. It's only gotten worse. So I just wanted to kind of think about writing a story about that. And I ultimately did. And
what was it called? Was it a story or a script?
It's a script. It's called Flat Mountain, because there's actually a mountain that looks kind of flat in this area, kind of like, it's like an anthill kind of, but it looks kind of flat at the top. But yeah, it was called Colorado, and it's terrible. And I will never show anyone that. I think I showed a few people early on. But yeah, at first it was, you have to write bad until you can write good, right?
Always.
We all have bad stories in us. And I think it's easy to write bad and it's hard to write good. And when you're when you're starting off, you're definitely trying to, you're just trying stuff out, man. You're writing cliche and you don't know it, and you're writing more cliche, and you really just have to miss. You have to miss the rim a lot.
Were there any books you read, classes you took, things that you did to kind of brush up on writing, or did you just kind of dive into it?
Mostly I dived in. I'm just like that. But I did read a Sid Field book, screenplay. I was following Robert McKee's blog for a while, and I did actually. I was going to take his class in LA, but after the first day, I dropped out, and the reason I dropped out was it was kind of overwhelming me, like some of the theory stuff about sequencing and getting into scenes, getting out of scenes, reversals and all this stuff. And I was like, man, I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of theory. I was still really young, in the writing game. So I found it overwhelming and a little disheartening. So I actually spent the money on the seminar and didn't go to it. So you got to trust your gut with that, though, man. If you're not feeling something, if it's kind of discouraging you, you have to listen to that too. And I think that at the time I just was more, I just needed to play around with it more, just explore it on my own.
That makes sense. Well, so you did that, and how many other scripts between that first one that you say you didn't really like, and then Land?
Land was my third script.
Okay, so what were the lessons on the second one as well as the first that kind of got you into the right headspace for Land?
I think that Land is it's a straight ahead film in a lot of ways. There's a lot of simplicity to it. It's a protagonist who's in 99% of the scenes. There's a linear nature to the film that, I think with plot, and I think that's maybe my weaker, that's maybe my weakest part of my writing. I think I'm getting better at it, but I like character and I like dialogue and I like that. And when you're doing intricate plot, especially with a thriller, I find that challenging. And I think that Land was just made to be, it felt intimate and it felt like that it didn't need to be too intricate or splashy in terms of plot. So I think that's why it was more of a successful script for me to write. I think the second one was better than the first one. It was still another thriller.
What was it called?
It was called Golden Gate. It was about a kid that could have stopped another kid from jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, but didn't because he was being bullied and went through his life full of regret. And then, was an unhappy adult and then had to go back and try to rectify the situation by challenging the bullies.
Interesting.
I don't think the story was necessarily a bad story, but I don't think my execution was great on it, And again, I mean, the difference between writing a thriller where there's a lot more plot turns and twists and reversals versus a straight ahead drama. And even some of the reviews on Land have been, it's been interesting. It's like, this is good, but it's such a simple, plot, and it is, and you can't argue that. I think there's a lot of simplicity to it, but I also think that's the way that movie needed to be written.
Well, I mean, I think something's to be said about that. Having your protagonist in every scene gives the audience a connection that they don't always have, right, with movies that have a lot more characters and move a little faster. So that's a good start. Simplicity also allows all the other artisans involved in a movie to paint broader on the canvas, and the canvas of this movie is just beautiful with the outdoors. Yeah. So, I want to ask the most common question. I know it's a boring one, but what gave you the exact idea for Land? And we'll get into the spoilers and, kind of intricacies later, but what gave you the idea to start the screenplay?
You bet. Yeah. It was basically, like I said, we moved from Denver out to some country north of Denver. And I started kind of just this kind of thought experiment about what it would be like to disappear from humanity, And I started thinking about what you would need to do logistically, financially. How would you do it? Where would you buy property? How could you ensure that no one else would ever come across your property? So just got into that, like, would you, how much food could you bring? Would you have to kill animals? You'd have to know what you're doing. You would need weapons, probably more than one. So it was just kind of like a casual thought experiment. But the next thing that happened is I started thinking about, well, why would anybody do that? Why would anybody drop out of the world to that level? I mean, even hermits go and check the mailbox, right? Like there's still a level of connection to the world for most people, even if they're withdrawn. But I was thinking that this person would completely disappear and really never want to be seen again. And so for me, it had to be pain. It had to be grief. It had to be trauma. It had to be something that was driving that person to apparently not kill themselves, but in a sense, kill themselves from the world, right? It's kind of a metaphorical suicide. And I mean, and honestly, I think Edie, well, we won't go into anything, but I think that was how Edie was born, was kind of out of this idea of pain has to be the thing that's pushing this forward to go into the wilderness and disappear. And that's the idea, really. And then, going into Edie and then what kind of pain and what the trigger was and all of that stuff. So I don't know anybody that is out in the wilderness like that. In fact, I'm not that outdoorsy of a person myself. I go car camping here and there, but I'm not, a huge, I'd probably last a few, 3 or 4 days and then the bears would get me or something.
Well, so, I want to talk about your creative habit for a second. So you have this idea, and when you sit down to write, how important to your process was outlining? Where did you start once you started writing?
It's important. It's important. I mean, I know some people are, I mean, it's a spectrum, right? Some people are like, they outline the entire movie without jumping in at all. Some people don't do it at all. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I definitely outline. Usually it's kind of, it's just kind of like the Socratic method of asking a question and another question and another question. Who is this? Where do they live? Why? What's their gender? Are they married? Are they not married? Why? Do they have a kid? What age? Etc. And it's like one question begets the next, and you're constantly kind of confusing yourself in a way, but in a good way. But you're constantly you unraveling something that you don't know what it is yet. And for me, I write that, I type it. I don't long form it. I write it on my laptop, and I might write. I don't know, but then there's times too that I actually take a break from outlining because I got to jump into a scene to feel it, just to get into that place. I find it boring to outline to the point where it's just like it gets too methodical or something. So I like to get on my computer, write a scene if I can, get the flavor, get the feeling, and then go back to the outline. So it's not like the super disciplined thing, but it's definitely it's a mix between outlining and then jumping in and intuitively trying to feel the character out.
How long would you say that process was when you were outlining?
For this one, I mean, I want to say I finished this in like 8 weeks, which is really fast for me.
Start to finish, from outline to first draft?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. I'll have to double check that, but again, like that's a first draft. I mean, in a way, you could write a first draft that sucked in 5 days if you really wanted to. You know, you just throw it down, and it's not refined at all. But it was a short period of time. It was, but then there were a lot of problems with the script. The ending was off. The third act was off, and there was just a lot of things wrong. And I think that that's what you do with the first draft. You write it, and you have to discover. You find what the problems are after many drafts. So
I'm noting to come back to that later once we get into the spoilers, because I want to hear what those were. When you sit down to write each day, do you give yourself a page count to hit, or do you go for a certain amount of hours?
Again, I'm kind of on the spectrum with that. So I like to hit certain page numbers. I'm always happy if I get 3 or 4 pages in a day, but sometimes it's an edit day and it's just going through what I've already done. So unfortunately, I'm not getting that kind of fun, how the numbers are increasing kind of encouragement that you get when you're increasing your page count. But some days you just have to do that. Some days you have to do that for days. And then as far as time is concerned, like I write late at night. I stay up till 2:00 religiously, and have for years. And my wife does the morning shift. And then I write during the day when we have childcare. During the pandemic, that was more of a problem. My mom has done a lot of that for us. So she wasn't available, and now she is, which is fantastic. So I try to write during the day as well. And right now I'm working on a thriller that is taking me some time. I've probably been working on it for like 7 months or so. And it's a thriller with a lot of it's like a thriller that I wouldn't have attempted, a few years ago. I think it's more plotty than I've ever written anything. I haven't read anything this plotty before. So it's taking me some time on this one, but again, I think it's page count, time, ultimately it's just getting it done and trying to have a good productive day.
That's great. What do you do when you get writer's block? How do you handle it if you get it?
Doesn't Aaron Sorkin say like his starting spot is always writer's block? It's like that's like the de facto baseline start of his day. For me, there's something. I think I just do it anyway. It's kind of what I do, because it can be tedious sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'll jump out of it and I'll write a different scene. If I'm stuck with like I'm bored with this one thing that's causing me a lot of problems, I'll give it a break and then I can try something else and kind of just to go around it for a little while and doing something to try to get my interest going again with it if I'm getting bored with it or overwhelmed. And when you're writing a script for 7 or 8 months, it definitely does get a little bit, there's a tedium there that happens.
Well, so, one of the things that writers, especially younger writers, have starting off in their careers, but honestly, it goes to writers of all ages, is, getting notes from your friends. Obviously you don't want to ask a friend for notes until the draft you feel is really good. I mean, as you've said in a million before you, that first draft sometimes is junk, and it really is the clay that you're able to then sculpt. Right. So showing your first draft to friends for notes,
yeah,
I would advise against. There's no one way to do it, so I don't want to be prescriptive, but like, you could be wasting people's time, including your own, by the way, because you should be able to look at your first draft and know rooms for improvement. But people sometimes get lost when it comes to collating notes, right? Because you could have a few friends that are really passionate about one thing and a few friends that are really passionate about another. And you have to be able to have your own gut instinct to decide how to go forward. So what was your notes process like, especially for a script which, has most of it one character in solitude with no dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's an easier read for a lot of people too. It's kind of like it resonates or it doesn't. My wife is my number one reader. She's a creative writing major at college. She's a photographer. She's a voracious reader. So she's kind of like my number one go-to person, always has been. I don't share it with friends usually. One of the reasons is that I don't trust that they either will read it or will care about it, or even that they'll give me good notes. So I don't really go to my friends for any notes at all. I never have. And the few times I do share with people, the family, they don't read it anyway for whatever reason. So that doesn't even happen.
Wait, you give it to them and they don't read it?
Yeah.
I love it.
But they'll see the movie. I mean, they'll praise me for the movie, but
that's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. I've given the script to many people over the years, or a script, one of my scripts, and they just don't read it for whatever reason.
All right. Well, so notes really doesn't sound like it was that difficult for you. Like, obviously you would take notes from your wife and just use your gut instinct as to what worked and what didn't. Would that be
I had a great screenplay analyst, Andrew Hilton.
Say that last name again?
Andrew Hilton. And he was helpful, giving me some solid notes on it. I think getting people to vet your material that are qualified is huge, especially if you're going to enter it into a contest, because you're going up against thousands of other scripts. So you want to make sure everything is dialed in as much as possible. And not everybody has a wife like mine, who's qualified to give notes. But even, it's just, I don't want just my wife's notes. Like, well, my wife says it's amazing, so it must be amazing. I mean, it's like,
right. Everybody's wife likes their scripts. Right. So yeah, that's a danger.
Awesome. Right. So
it's interesting that you brought up going to a script consultant, because it's something that's hotly debated a lot with writers. Some see it as a predatory practice that isn't informative. Others absolutely swear by it. And I know as a fact that there are some great script consultants out there, but you really have to do your homework to make sure you're getting with somebody that could actually help you rather than just, tell you the sky is blue. So is there anything that you want to highlight from the process of using a script consultant that really helped you see the forest for the trees?
I mean, I've used a few of them, and the one that I ended up with was Drew. It was reasonable. His notes were really insightful. I mean, look, if people's notes don't resonate with you, you shouldn't accept those notes. You should just move on. But if they do resonate and they continue to resonate, then I think you need to listen to that. So I don't see. Look, also when I was getting those notes, I didn't have a rep. I didn't have a manager or an agent.
Right.
I know inside. I had nobody on the inside of Hollywood that I was looking at my material and going, "Oh wow, this is really good." So for me, it was like you kind of have to buy a little bit of access. And again, I'm in Boulder too, so I'm not in LA, which makes it even more difficult. So I'm not able to just get experts' eyeballs on my work without paying for it. And so let's
talk about that. So getting Andrew's advice was one step. You got some good notes. What was your path towards getting represented? And then, setting this up as well, because, this is great. This is your first produced screenplay. So it's a unique experience. And for people that are currently in the throes of breaking in, I think it'd be great for people to hear about your path.
Yeah. So I got got my first manager off of Land placed in the 2016 Nickel Academy screenwriting contest, top 50, not sure where in the top 50, but somewhere in there. And
just for anybody that doesn't know, the Nickel Writing Fellowship is through the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the people that do the Oscars, and it's set up to give I think the top 10 a stipend of like 35 grand,
Yeah.
which allows them to write a screenplay for a year of their choosing and
Yep.
to, you know, quote unquote, quit their job and have mentors and stuff like that. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. You getting into the top 50 is one of the, you know,
Yeah.
quarterfinals, semifinalists. I can't remember what they would call it at that point, but like, you're right. That's a great way to get on somebody's radar.
Right.
And so how many managers or agents did you send it to before somebody decided they liked it?
I think so. I was working with a career consultant, career coach, and
A career coach that specializes in entertainment industry?
working with screenwriters. Yeah, I was working with somebody who was doing that, and anyway, I worked with her. She knew managers. She sent it to one of her contacts, who signed me quickly. I don't think I ever had an option to go. I don't think I had an opportunity to meet or talk to anyone else. If I think about it, I don't think I did. So it was just this one person that I signed with. And that was directly off of, land, it doing well in the contest. A lot of people that were reading it liked it. So that's kind of how it happened. But, again, and getting I would stress to your audience that, getting a contest placement can really turn some heads. And honestly, you have to turn somebody's head in Hollywood, right? And you have to turn many more heads, but you have to start with one head that is turned towards you because you did something that was, on some level significant or impressive. And you have to build off of that. So the manager.
So it sounds like you had a good experience with the life coach, the career coach. Well, I mean, because I don't hear too many people using. So that's another interesting thing. Or might you have been signed without like a career coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would have at some point. As far as the coach, I mean, I think it goes different ways. I think it was useful at the time when I was using those services, but I haven't done that in a few years.
Right.
And it's not useful to me anymore.
Well, right. It's really for your first time to get that manager. I
kind of think like there's certain things when you're on the bottom rung of trying to get into Hollywood as a writer, that you might do that when you're more established. You don't have to. I mean, I have, legit agents and I have reps that can read my work. I know producers that'll read my work. Like it's there now, but back in 2015 and 16, that wasn't happening. So it was kind of like any game in town was kind of what I was going to go for.
Well, that's great. Well, so you got a rep, and then tell us how it started going on the track towards becoming a reality. And did your rep get you other work, like assignment work or rewrites or anything like that before land was made?
I'll say with the contest. So what happened with the contest? So my manager really wasn't involved with land at all. That was already happening. One of the readers of the Nickel contest in 2016 was a producer on land named Laura Kennedy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but she was working at Warner Brothers, a VP of casting in 2016. She was a reader, loved the script, reached out to me after the contest, connected. I'd love to do this movie. What can we do? And it started there. Just basically just a reader in a contest contacting me after the
that's
the
great, man. I mean, that's rare for top 50. So that's awesome. I mean, right. Nickel is one of the most revered contests in the world because it's run by the Academy. So that I've never heard of a reader directly reaching out. I mean, I have over the years, but yeah, somebody that has that kind of chutzpah to just go for it. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome. So that's when the kind of the rock started rolling in 2016. We got Alan Stewart, another producer who was just on Sully with Tom Hanks and Clint Eastwood. She got on board in 2017. And then a year later, lightning speed, we got Robin Wright to sign on as the director.
What year was that?
Actress. What's that?
What year was that?
18 for Robin Wright. Yeah, 2018 for Robin Wright. So it was like a 2-year difference between when I placed in the contest and when we got Robin Wright signed on to direct. But at that time, she wasn't planning on acting. And that whole thing was happening independently of this manager that I had. And that relationship didn't last too long. So there was a stretch that I was unwrapped from late 2018 to the beginning of 2019. So like about a year. And then I got my script ended up in some agent's hands, I think at UTA, that passed it on to my current manager, who I'm very happy with, Sam Warren over at LBI Entertainment. So he found me. It's just like, isn't it? It's just so weird how Hollywood is kind of like, you never know how it's going to get into somebody's hands. You can never plan for it. You just don't know. So it's just
and there's no one way to do it either. That's the other interesting element, in which, like William Goldman famously said, nobody knows anything. Right. Everybody could forge their own path. You just got to pick a path.
Right. That's what I say. That's what I've heard too. It's like there's a million ways into Hollywood, but they're all different. Like everyone has their own path and their own story. Mine is that my script was discovered by somebody who just fell in love with it during the contest and reached out to me afterwards.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You can read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. There is so much to explore, and we recently published issue 42. We worked so hard on it, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. I'm not going to even tell you all of it because you could just go to backstory.net and look up our table of contents to see what's inside. There's two things I will highlight, though. We have a section called Off the Shelf, where we publish unproduced screenplays by writers of note. And in this issue, we have two really cool ones. We have Ghouls of New York by Simon Kinberg. That's right. He's the writer of X-Men, Days of Future Past, and so many other great things. And this was Simon's first screenplay that he sold, that basically got out there, got him represented, and it's never been produced. It's a cool, true story about grave robbers in the 1890s in New York City. And you could really learn a lot about Simon's style when he was starting out by reading this script. And of course, we have a full in-depth interview with Simon about it as well and how his habits have changed over the years. We did the same thing for Joe Carnahan with his script, LA 58. He's been working on it for 10 years. He co-wrote it with his brother, Matthew Michael Carnahan. I got to say, it is one heck of a script, and I hope you check it out. And Joe was even cool enough to give us some concept art. And of course, he gave us a fantastic in-depth interview about his long journey of writing this and how he's even done a rewrite on it recently. And he thinks he's actually getting closer to making it, which we definitely want to happen. But this will give you a chance to be one of the first to read it and be familiar with the project in case Joe does. If you've never read us before, you could, of course, check out our free issue over at backstory.net or via the iPad app. And it's a full free issue. So there's a lot to explore in it. And if you like it, it would mean everything to me to have you support my passion project. I want to offer you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that'll save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. It'll get you access to our archive. So look, there's a lot to explore. You could read issues 29 to 42, and I'll continue to add old issues when I have a chance as we make new content. So we will continue building that archive when we have a chance, but there's so much to explore. So I really hope you consider becoming a Backstory subscriber. And folks, remember, Land is an independent film. It debuted at Sundance. So I do hope that you search it out. You can watch it right now through whatever place that you're used to getting movies, online or on demand or through your smart TV. So I hope you search out Land. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our chat with co-writer Jesse Chatham about his debut feature film, Land. So you pretty much didn't get work. Did your manager get you some work before Land actually went into production?
Nope. I was working on a new script, developing a new script with that manager.
Okay.
For a period of time, I was developing it. And then there was no work. I had no work. And, not all managers are created equal. And, this manager was very smart, but it just, the relationship was, the way that we related was not optimal for me. And
tell me this, here's the magic question. So as a lot of young writers breaking in, you have to believe in your script. Obviously, the Hollywood adage of hurry up and wait is always true.
Yeah.
And so were you doing other freelance non-Hollywood, non-entertainment work during that time just to stay afloat? Because a lot of writers, they have writing even as their main gig, but still find a side gig until that that first big deal comes through, be it a rewrite
Right.
or an assignment or a film going into production. So if
Right.
you're willing, what were you doing on the side?
I was just I was writing. I was writing other stuff,
Okay.
and I was being a dad. And my wife, we lived really cheaply.
Sure.
Actually, we were living on. We had a place that we were renting for $1,800 a month.
Oh, wow.
It was like we had paid twice that in Denver, so we had the ability to have a smaller footprint, so to speak, financially. So I didn't have to go get a side hustle going.
That's great.
Just wasn't something that I had to do. And I think that kind of helped me. You know, I'm working on my 8th feature in 7.5 years. So I think I've been pretty productive. I'd like to be more productive, but that's kind of my pace. But I think that if I had to have gotten like a 20-hour week job plus the kids, young children, I think it would have diminished my output and possibly, put off, me being in the position that I'm in right now.
Well, so tell us about Land ramping up to production. What was the spark aside from, Robin Wright deciding to make this her directorial debut, which is amazing because, she was unproven as a director. Now she's certainly not, because she knocked it out of the park on this movie, but she was well known as an actor. So was there a certain point where she just decided that attaching her name to star in this would be what would push it over the edge?
So I haven't had a lot of direct interaction with Robin over the years, just because I live out here, she's there, the pandemic, et cetera. But I have communicated with her via phone, email, and I got to meet her when I was on set, actually in 2019, which is really fun. I think that it just kind of built momentum over time. So we got Laura was the first producer involved, and then we got Alan, and then we got Robin. I think when Robin got on board, everybody knew that this is legit now. Like we have a shot at getting this thing made. And the more that Robin decided that she was going to do it, I think the more excitement there was around it. They went and got Focus Features at Cannes, or Focus Features got us at Cannes in 2019, I want to say. It must have been 2019. And they were pitching it, and they needed to find somebody for this film that was going to be on board with the distribution of it. And I think it was the last meeting. This is what I've heard, that was the last meeting of 2 days of meetings where Focus Features was like the last one, and they came in and they loved it and they agreed to do it.
That's great.
So I don't know. I mean, I guess it was different moments of it kind of sparking. I don't think it was just one.
Just when it was going around and just like as people were considering making it, were you getting any crazy notes ever? Because it's always funny to hear if that happened about the silence issue, because writing silence is something that not a lot of people do. When it works, it is powerful and awesome. When it fails, it's a nightmare. And people have that nightmare always in their minds of silence equaling being slow, but it doesn't have to be based on the style of the movie. So were there any crazy notes that you received while you were trying to set it up?
Yeah, I think there were. I mean, at one point, I think I had 17 or 18 pages of silence, which is excessive. That's a lot of silence. And, we cut it down quite a bit from that. But, I think that I did get some notes on a lot of different things about it, especially in the first act that I had written originally. So there was a lot of different notes. But I'm trying to think if anything was like, I don't remember anyone going like, we have to have a lot more talking. I think there was maybe just like, let's have less not talking, but not necessarily inject it with more talking.
It's just funny because like when she talks sometimes and it breaks up like a silent sequence, she's just saying about one sentence to herself. You know what I mean? Like it is something, but it's like, it's not like, oh, well, now there's talking. Like she's still by herself. Okay. Well, what was the budget and schedule? And then we're going to move into the spoiler section.
And I think it was like $7 million.
Okay. And what was the schedule?
29 days.
Okay.
In October of 19.
Great.
29 days. Yep. On the top of 8,500 foot mountain in the Canadian Forest, National Forest near Calgary.
Gotcha. All right. Well, so podcast listeners, YouTube watchers, if you're watching us on the Backstory Magazine YouTube channel, or podcast listeners, if you're listening to us, we are now in the spoiler section. So if you have not yet seen Land, go see it. I highly recommend it. if you've been feeling bottled up lately, you'll feel like you're in the outdoors for a while. Like it's actually kind of a vacation, this movie. It looks freaking beautiful, but it's a great drama as well. So you have been warned. We are in the spoiler section. Now that we're here in the spoiler section, I guess tell us, like, what were some of the early act problems that you had now that you could speak more freely about it?
Sure.
I'm curious, did you have flashbacks? Were you doing more with the therapist? Is that what was going on in the first act? Because your first act is kind of getting out of the city and then realizing that maybe the choice of going to the country might not be as easy as she thought it was going to be.
No, it was a radically different first act. I actually had kind of a more traditional setup where 10 to 15 pages, we get to know Edie and her life, her family, kind of pre-inciting incident.
Okay.
She's happy. She's a lawyer in Chicago. Just kind of like setting the table for who Edie is prior to this trauma. And then the trauma is a mass shooting at in a mall, outdoor mall, around Christmas time. And it's pretty harrowing. It's, at the time, there's so many mass shootings. Unfortunately, we haven't had that this last year because of the pandemic. I fear that it's going to come back, but I've always wondered if cinema should portray it a little more viscerally, what it's like to be in that situation. So I kind of did a really intense scene of her being at the mall, and her husband and her son were elsewhere, and they were meeting at a movie theater. And then we hear the guns go off, and then there's just this, and it gets crazy. And I think that, well, it just finished. So that happens, and her family dies, her husband and son, and then she goes into this kind of can barely move, like she's laying on her sofa with the kind of camera floating over her. The Christmas tree is dying, the presents are unopened. She's just catatonic. And we kind of build into a situation where she decides she needs to leave. If she's going to live life anymore, not kill herself, she has to get out of the situation. She can't know anybody anymore. Emma was always there. Her sister was always a part of the movie. And then there was like a training period as well where Robin's character, Edie, goes to a training camp, like a survivalist camp, and trains with these guys. Well, this guy kind of trains her on how to live out there. So there's a little bit more like linear, like setting the table for it, and then the preparation for going out to the wilderness. I kind of wanted, for myself, I needed to understand what it took. So I wrote that down because I figured the audience might want to know that too. But I think the decisions that Robin made were great, because it was like, we're not going to focus on what that specific trauma is exactly, or even how experienced or not experienced Edie is to go out and live in the wilderness. We're just going to go out here. It's a meditation in many ways on pain and trauma and grief. And we wanted to experience her isolation. So I think Robin just made some decisions. I was like, look, we're not going to get into that. And also, those scenes are intense. Like those are, could be upsetting to many people and could be controversial. I'm okay with that, but I'm not signing checks and all that. And I understand that. I think Robin made a good decision, but it was just different.
Well, so that sequence that you just described, that was in your Nichols top 50.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's interesting. You're getting into something else in which at a certain point, Aaron Diggum came on as a rewriter at a certain point.
Right.
And I'm just curious, it has nothing to reflect badly on you. It is the most common thing that happens in Hollywood all the time. Sometimes those writers come on and don't get credit. Sometimes they come on and do get credit. So it for the times when they don't get credit, it's even more an occurrence that people just aren't aware of. What was your experience like with that, for knowing that you were being rewritten and seeing that period? And did they still consult with you? And how did that work out? Or did you and Aaron ever speak?
Yeah, those are good questions. First of all, it's tough. It's tough to have anybody come in. It's a spec that I wrote in 2014, and it's been my baby. You think about it in personal terms like that, but it is the business. It is the business, and people get rewritten all the time. So I think that initially it was like, that sucks. Like maybe I should have done better. Like they don't like my work or whatever. But it's really not like that. So Aaron coming in, I had no interaction with Aaron until about like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And she's great. I like her a lot. But I guess she only worked for a short amount of time on it, doing her notes and then her stuff, and then she was off again. So I didn't interact with her. She never called me to ask about, parts of the script or
Sure.
what do you think about this? Nothing like that. And she did some additions here and there, and I think a lot of her stuff was not. Some of her stuff didn't make it in. My stuff didn't always make it in. So a lot of that was happening in the editing room too.
That makes sense. I mean, like, did you ever consider more characters? Obviously the main cast is Miguel and Alawa with the sister kind of, Emma on the side
barely
as, barely in there. And so was there ever like a larger cast, or was it really just by design to be this small?
No, in the first act, there were two male characters, Percy and Clive. Percy was a guy that helped people disappear.
Really?
Yeah, he's like a vanisher or whatever. And she felt like she needed to kind of vanish from the world. She's going to vanish from her sister and not tell her sister. She wanted to just kind of be thought of as dead. And so it was just this guy with the Cowboys, Stetson, and he had some flavor to him. I like that character. And then Clive was my survivalist trainer guy.
Okay.
He was like a Desert Storm veteran and all of that. Yeah, there were a few others, but I mean, it's a sparsely peopled script. I mean, there's not a lot of people in it.
It's interesting because like I totally see where those characters make sense, especially the concept of making somebody seem dead. But
right.
Somebody just packing up one day. I'm guessing Edie still has a bank account. None of this is in the movie, but I'm guessing that she might have a bank account to return to that just hasn't been active because, she goes so far off the grid that there's no power. She doesn't have electricity or running water. She's like, basically getting those things on her own. But it's interesting because like that is a very clean cut for Robin Wright to make that doesn't take away anything from your story and just refocuses everything on your protagonist. Because the concept is get away, and she still does just get away.
No, I think you're right, man. I think the meat of the story really is it's in the mountains. It's with David Bashir's character. And the first act, I mean, when you're the writer, though, a lot of times you have to write stuff to realize what you need and don't need, and you have to write it again. And it's this kind of continual kind of clarification of like, oh, I had to write that way. Now I know I don't need it that way, but I still had to write it so I know that it was a mass shooting. I don't need to show it anymore, but I still needed to know it. So there's still this level of like you have to write, in and out of things all the time.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like the biggest change thematically is like we know that she's suffering from something, but it's now a secret. Right. Yep. By not seeing it. So, a secret in a film that a protagonist is living with, a secret pain, the expectation is you'll find out later. So even if your script had that final hospital scene between her and Miguel, the same as the final film goes, it now is suddenly a secret rather than her just repeating something we already know. In that sense, was in your version, Miguel's, journey a secret that isn't revealed until he's in the hospital bed?
Yeah.
At home, dying at home.
Yeah. You mean the secret of his health?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. She had made it clear that she didn't want to know anything about the outside world. She didn't want, Miguel to bring anything up there that was, too informative, like a newspaper, a magazine, anything like that. She just didn't want to know anything about it. So I always liked that idea of, then I'm not going to tell you that I have throat cancer because, you don't want to know about this. And it's not my job to tell you. And I just love the idea too, that it's like the only reason she comes off that mountain is because she cares about, Miguel. She loves him and cares about him. And he kind of saved her twice, right? He saved her physically when he found her or when she was sick and freezing. And then he kind of brought her back to life and had her call her sister after leaving him. So, but yeah, no, it was a secret too. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing though, because like, you just said that like she has a love for him, and a misstep would have been for a movie like this to turn into a traditional love story, right? Set against the backdrop of survivalism. Were there any drafts where you ever played with it? I love that it didn't, but I could have easily seen it possibly working, but I'm glad again that you didn't.
Yeah, no, it was always platonic, man, from the beginning. I never wanted it to be sexual or romantic at all. I always wanted it to be fellow sufferers. And the quiet intimacy of that, where you don't even have to talk about the specifics of that suffering. It's just there. It's kind of a presence. It's an energy, and it never struck me as something that should be romantic at all. So
That's great. It was interesting because, again, with The Secret, her pain is so overwhelming for her that the concept of somebody else that has pain, right? Because she does at a certain point find out that he had a family too.
Yeah.
Like it's foreign to her that he could be the cause of his own pain. Right. And what's the fascinating thematic is that she's considering self-harm. She's considering suicide.
Right.
And she's extricated herself from society.
Right.
But Miguel's secret that he is in a repetitive state for past crimes, and that he's opened his heart to the world. And that's how he's found her. That's how he mentors her to teach her survival skills and to care for her. And as he says, he volunteers bringing fresh water to Native American reservations and stuff like that. It's showing her a path that you kind of assume she might go on after the movie. At what point did you realize that Miguel's secret isn't just that he's dying, but that he has this terrible guilt for what happened to his family, that he caused a drunk driving accident, and that's how he lost him? Well,
that actually, something that was not in my version.
Okay.
Drafts. I had a Native American character, and his family did die. What I think is there was a suicide that one of his daughters had committed suicide, and then his wife and daughter had also maybe died in a car crash. But it was a little bit more not his fault. It wasn't my Native American character's fault. Whereas in this, it is Miguel's fault. He was driving and he was drunk. But I like that they changed that. I think that's cool because he is kind of a penitent, and he's walking around in a way, maybe trying to absolve himself from his sins, and helping Edie maybe is a part of that. Or not, or I mean, he's just a good human being, but I mean, he's not a perfect human being at all. And what he did was terrible. But I think that idea is kind of interesting about his pain kind of being something that needs to be redeemed, or there needs to be a redemptive aspect of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great addition in which they took your idea, which already was working, of him having a secret, from her, that his life was limited, right? That he's dying of throat cancer. And then adding that extra element was just like a nice topper. You said you got to visit the set. What was that like? How long were you on set?
Very briefly. I was there for about 24 to 36 hours, like really quick, but really, really cool, really fun. It was very cold. From Colorado. I thought I brought enough warmth up there, but I didn't. I met Robin. She was so nice. Introduced me to the crew. It was just fun to visit a set, man. It was, because what's crazy is, like, I wrote this on my dining room table, late at night in 2014, right? And then here it is. There's like these trailers and these cars and trucks and carpenters and painters, and it's like seeing it come to life like that was really kind of surreal to experience that. So it was special. It was really fun to go up there.
That's awesome. Did you get to do any rewrites during production, or was it really just like a quick pop in, say hi, see the sets?
That was it, man.
Okay,
I haven't worked on the script since probably early 2019.
Gotcha. Now, did you get into the WGA as part of this?
I did.
That's great. That's great.
I did. No, this movie opened up a lot of doors. I've got great reps now. Getting a rep for writers, like such an accomplishment. It's like, even if you don't have money, it's gonna, like, you can still feel good about yourself. So
no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I do have some reps, and so it's opened up doors, and I've actually got another movie that's optioned. Well, it's kind of under development at a pre-development, like rewrite development, at a small studio in town, though. So that's kind of been cool too.
That's great. The passage of time was interesting. You're seeing winters, you're seeing summers, you're seeing falls, as these landmarkers. Was it always like that? Because I mean, it was interesting to, it's something to consider for a production. They have to go back, it would seem, a few times, but or they're just going to different parts of, similar country in different, areas where they could film.
I think that was a hard thing. It's remarkable that they got it all done in 29 days in the same month. They didn't even go back. It's insane. It really worked out well because
that's crazy. I thought you were going to tell me that they went back at different times a year.
No, I don't
That's
think
wild.
they did. I don't think they did. I think they did it all there. I mean, they did the psychiatrist scene at another time, but that's easily done. What I wrote was about 12 years of Edie being up there. So I had Edie growing old, like her hair noticeably gray, and with no intention of ever coming back. And there was kind of a more established life for her there. In the case we have now, it's about 2.5 years. So I had it about 12. But there was always the cycle of the seasons, right? You always needed to kind of show the passage of time. Here it's fall again. It's winter again. It's spring. So that was a big part of like kind of the atmosphere of the movie. And there was always that kind of advancing time element to it.
Editing is the last stage of storytelling. What surprised you about the editing process? Were there any major scenes that they shot and cut?
I mean, apart from what I knew about Act 1 was going to be very, very, very different. I think Act 2 and Act 3 were more like, okay, yeah, that's about right. Like I kind of followed it. It didn't seem radically different to me. And it was always great when it was like picture perfect what I had written. I'm like, yes, like the bathtub scene or, the Miguel scene dying. And all that stuff was just verbatim what I had seen in my mind and I had written. And it was nice to see like the Tears for Fears song. That was by Aaron did that one. And I thought that was such a great addition. Just that, Miguel singing off key with, the whole Tears for Fears song.
Right. Giving them a love for 80s music. I thought was great.
Right.
That was cool. Did it teach you anything about exposition? How much to put on the page when you're writing because of those subtle mysteries, like with Miguel not, showing things, but maybe having some hints?
I mean, I think that the script there was never a lot of exposition to begin with. Like, I try not to do a lot of that if I can help it. I like a lean script. I get overwhelmed when I see dense paragraphs on the page. I like to make it sometimes you have to do it though. I mean, you have to do it sometimes, but whatever you can do to like make the exposition via the action of the character or the dialogue of the character, that's what I prefer to do.
Where do you think Edie would go after this? Where do you now that she's called her sister and she's reconnected, the ending that you had created, right? Where do you think she would go? Do you think she would like go back into society and be more giving and just split her time between being out in the cabin? Or do you think she would just call her sister and then go back to her cabin and, pretty much stay up there?
Yeah. You know what? That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it that much.
Really? Okay.
I haven't.
That's okay. There's no reason why you had to.
I think what I would see is that she would go back to the world. I think that's my guess.
Because she's ready. Yeah.
Yeah. And she can always go back to the cabin, but maybe she wants to be because who else is going to go up there now? She needs people to be in relationship with.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, what was your toughest scene? What was the scene that you found yourself rewriting the most over and over again? And how did you creatively rise to the challenge? How'd you get through it?
I don't know about what I wrote, what I had to rewrite over and over again. That's not popping at me, but I will say that I cried many times in the movie where Miguel and Edie, last connect. When I write it, when I cry at my own stuff, I feel like that's like when I'm writing a drama. I don't really cry at my thrillers, but if I'm writing a drama and I get moved by it multiple times, that's always really gratifying. So I can give you that. As far as like what was difficult, I mean, I don't really recall exactly what would have been like especially hard that I had to continue to rewrite.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. Well, what's next? What are you working on next that you want to tell us about?
I'm working on a female-driven revenge thriller. I'm excited about it. I've been working on it for a while. Don't want to talk about the details too much because I'm still kind of figuring it out. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. I have the thriller over at the other place that hopefully something will get going with that. And then, yeah, man, trying to build off this land momentum and going to try to pitch some folks. I got an email today from my manager from a company that wants to hear a pitch on an article at a publication. So hopefully just kind of get some work, man. Like, let's do this. I want to keep my health insurance. My health insurance expires in July. So I got to I
Oh my God. I feel like I'm in the middle of a new thriller now. You have a new deadline. You got to keep that health insurance. So I hope
insurance, man.
I hope you do. I hope you do. Well, look, you've been very generous with your time. I really loved Land. I thought it was just a really well put together movie. It was just like, if you consider movies escapism, it was just like a nice escape, a nice retreat, a good meditation. So, congrats on a job well done. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks for your time, Jesse.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate it, man.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer Jesse Chatham for being so generous with his time and talking about his debut feature film, Land. And Land it's great. It's a film that you'll really enjoy. So I hope you search it out. You can watch it right now wherever you're used to finding movies, online or on demand. So I really hope you support independent cinema and you check out Land. And while you're surfing around online, I also hope you check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. So, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners support my passion project. You could explore our table of contents over at backstory.net. There's so many things you could do. You could read the free issue over at backstory.net or in the Backstory app on an iPad. So hopefully, if you decide you want to subscribe, use coupon code SAVE5. That'll save you $5 off a subscription for 1 year. It'll give you access to anything new we produce, and it will also allow you to access our archive, which currently goes from about issue 42 to issue 29. And I'm going to continue adding older issues as we have time while we're producing new content as well. So that's kind of our trick. But look, it would mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and my YouTube watchers support my passion project. So thanks for considering subscribing. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. Folks, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram. And you could also find me running the Backstory_mag account on Twitter or the Backstory_mag account on Instagram. And I am terrible about using the Backstory account on Instagram. I've got to get better about it and do more on Twitter with it as well. I also have a Facebook fan page, which I hope I'm going to use a little more of this year, but I don't really use Facebook that often. So finding me on Twitter or on Instagram are the two places to find me. You can also always email yogoldsmith@gmail.com. I promise not to get back to you immediately, but I will do my darndest to respond. Look, I'm an easy guy to get a hold of. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.